Hello, everybody. Sal Mayorana, and I am here on the Believe in Bills podcast without my co-host, my comrade at arms, Adam Beane, had a conflict today, so I'm going to fly solo with our guest, who is someone that you guys probably all already know, Chris Trapasso from CBS Sports. He is a well-respected draft analyst and a guy that I have often leaned on. He probably doesn't know that, but I usually use a lot of your stuff, Chris, in my stories, give you credit. And I also follow, because you really do a great job with tracking these prospects. So why don't you say hello to our audience and we'll get right into it.
Well, first off, Sal, thanks for having me on and thanks for all those kind words. And this is one of my favorite times of the year. I don't want to say it's my favorite because I do love when football season actually comes around, but it's just a fun high watermark of the offseason to have the NFL draft. I've watched almost 300 prospects, grades, evaluations, scouting reports, pro comparisons. So all the final projects for me have been turned in, and we are ready for the NFL draft.
Seriously, man, all you guys who do this, you and Brugler and Kuiper, all of you, it just blows my mind that you have the bandwidth to watch all that film, watch all these prospects. I don't know how many hours in the day it takes, but it is really incredible. And I think back to when I first started, Chris, I've been covering the team for almost 4 decades now, when we had Mel Kiper's book. Yeah. And that was the only thing we had for reference for these prospects. It's crazy now the way it's just become such a cottage industry. So Again, I know the fans appreciate all the work that you guys put in. And I know that we, as beat reporters for all these teams, really do appreciate it because I know I certainly didn't have the time to do it. So anyways, we'll get right into it here. And look, I know you guys do 12 mock drafts a day, I think.
Seems like
I did see your latest one, and you were on the guy in your latest mock draft for the NFL, but with the Bills pick that I've been on pretty much the whole time, at least since the combine. And that's Kenneth Grant of Michigan, the defensive tackle. Obviously, the things I like about him, the ball production, the production period, the size that he would bring to Buffalo's defensive line, which is such a glaring need at that one technique position. But tell me why you think Kenneth Grant is the right fit for the Bills.
Well, for a lot of those reasons that you just pointed out, and I can expand on them too, that the fact that he's only 21 years old. And I think you can look back to, all the way back from 2019 until the present, the lone first round pick that the Bills have made who has become a really good player is Greg Rousseau. And he was also a younger prospect, was 21 years old when the Bills drafted him. And he has developed into I don't want to say dominant defensive end, but a quality player that's earned that contract extension. So I think the fact that he's still young in Kenneth Grant, you get someone that has a lot of upside. He's already a good run defender. And I think you saw glimpses of him as a quality pass rusher. And you're right that at that size, they've liked to have a bigger body next to Ed Oliver. They need someone that is going to help the run defense on first and second downs or in obvious running situations. So in a very deep defensive tackle class, I think Kenneth Grant would represent a different flavor from a lot of the other players that are more just smaller, 280 to 300 pound defensive linemen that are pass rushers. Kenneth Grant has light feet and he's 330 pounds.
Yeah, that's the weight is so important. Daquan Jones, I think he weighs in at about 310 maybe, but he's in his last year of his contract. They need a guy to come in, and this is my opinion, to come in, be Daquan Jones' backup. As the year progresses, take more and more snaps away from Daquan Jones, and then obviously be the starter next season. I think Grant he would check so many boxes for the Bills. Now, let me ask you this about Grant. He had Mason Graham next to him, who is considered, a top 10 pick in this draft, although it seems like he's slipping a little bit. But do you think there's anything to the theory that maybe Grant was living a little bit off of Mason Graham, and that's why he's considered such a high prospect, or do you disagree with that?
That's a fantastic question. And I've actually heard both sides of that Mason Graham, a lot of the reason why he was so productive over the last 2 seasons at Michigan was because he had a 330 pounder next to him that every single offensive coordinator and every single offensive line had to account for at times with 2 blockers. And I think that's the idea or the vision that the Bills would have if they picked him to help Ed Oliver be in those one-on-one situations where we've seen he can be a high-level pass rusher on the inside. And that's when Sean McDermott's defense is at its best, when they're rotating along the defensive front and Ed Oliver is playing his best football. So I don't think necessarily that Grant, the only reason why we're viewing him as a potential first-round pick or maybe an early second-rounder is because he played next to Mason Graham. I think just the two of those star defensive tackles at Michigan fed off each other and equally are two very good prospects in their own right.
Tell me a little bit about Derek Harmon, who I think is probably going to be gone. Now, again, we have no idea.
We don't know
what the Bills are truly valuing too. He's about 15 pounds lighter than Kenneth Grant, but it seems like based on just the highlights that I've watched, and I'm sure your evaluation would tell me the same thing, he might bring a little bit more to the pass rush than Kenneth Grant. But do you think there's a chance Harmon gets down to the Bills at 30 and they have a choice between these two guys, or do you think he's gone probably in the early 20s, like a lot of guys that I've seen to have looked at think he's going up there?
Yeah, I think Derek Harmon will probably be gone before the Bills go on the clock at 30. Now, I think what is interesting, could he be on the board at 24 where the Minnesota Vikings pick and they only have 4 selections and they're really apt to trade back where Brandon Beane could make a trade up? That would make a lot of sense. I don't think that would be crazy if Derek Harmon was still available then. And you're right. He does give more pass rush ability right now. He's an older prospect, 23 years old, started at Michigan State, and then last season at Oregon. Beyond two-gapping and playing both sides of guards and the center to make plays against the run, he used his hands, his pass rush moves, and first-step quickness, and even a little bit of power to be a legitimate pass rushing threat at defensive tackle. And ironically enough, my comparison for him is actually Daquan Jones. They're similarly sized, like both taller defensive tackles, but right around 310, 315, long arms that they use very well. And I think if the Bills are like, hey, we can get a young 23-year-old Daquan Jones, they would sign up for that in a heartbeat. So with Kenneth Grant and Derek Harmon, I think those are the two headliners for really good fits that would make a lot of sense on this Bills defensive line.
There's a guy that really used the transfer portal, Ralph, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was kind of a middling guy until he from Michigan State, right? He stayed home. I think he's from Detroit originally. And it was probably a great decision that he moved away from home, went out, did his thing, picked the right place to go too, because they had a really good team last year. Yeah, he made quite, I bet he was probably second, third round guy if he had stayed at Michigan State. Do you think? I mean, the talent's there, but I don't know if the production would have ever shown out.
Yeah, he is definitely one of the better examples of how a prospect can use the transfer portal for his betterment in the NFL draft. He probably was tracking toward, like you said, day 2, maybe even early day 3, but then playing alongside a lot of other high caliber talent on that Oregon team that was number 1 in the nation for a long time during the college football season. He just routinely showed up as a pass rusher. And I think at that age 23 season, he really took that step forward in that really key area of being a eventual first round prospect. That if you're going to be a defensive tackle, go in the first round, you have to be explosive and you have to have pass rushing moves. And I think Derek Harmon gives both of those things to whichever team ultimately picks him.
All right, so I had to do a Gannett wide mock draft last week.
Oh, cool.
And so the Bills were sitting obviously at 30. There's no trades allowed. So as it was coming down, Grant and Harmon went, I think, like 23 to 27 in that range. And then Maxwell Hairston came off the board too, who I was going to give to the Bills if he was still sitting there. I ended up on Ohio State defensive tackle Tyleik Williams. And I was not disappointed with that pick because I think that if Grant and Harmon are both gone, and if Brandon Beane is still hell-bent on getting a D tackle in the first round, based on what I've seen, Chris, highlights again and reading about the kid, he looks like a pretty good option if that's what the Bills are looking at. What do you think of Tyleik Williams?
So this is a perfect segue to what I just mentioned about what historically we see for first round defensive tackles and why I don't really think Tyleik Williams would be in that first round range. the pass rush ability is just not there. He's about the same size as Kenneth Grant, even a little stockier, but tremendous run defender, the best run defending defensive lineman, even considering edge rushers in this entire class. He is going to stack, shed blockers. He mirrors running backs really well. He understands misdirection. He is everything that I think a defensive line coach wants out of a run stopper in the NFL. The pass rush ability is not quite there because the first step quickness, the sustained speed through the pocket and closing speed on quarterbacks is probably not first round caliber, but the Bills would be getting someone that I think has a very polished game who would come in and instantly boost their run defense. So at pick 30, and we heard Brandon Beane say that they don't have 30 first round picks. There's never 30 first round grades. Even if that would be dipping into someone that the Bills or a lot of other teams would have as a second round type talent, Tyleik Williams is going to come in with a very refined game against the run. And maybe the Bills, Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott would hope that they could get more out of him as a pass rusher. And that's what I would be kind of looking for too if I'm the Bills, someone that can generate pass rush beyond Ed Oliver inside.
All right. So for me, I think his best move, Beane's best move, if it's possible, if Grant or Harmon aren't there to be traded up for, and that's got to be a close gap because he can't give away too much draft capital. Yeah. I think the best thing they could do is drop back into the second round like they did last year. You've got 4 teams at the top of that round who, well, 3 of them could be looking for a quarterback at that 30th spot, right? Jackson Dart's name keeps coming up. Even Jalen Milroe, maybe. I'm thinking the best move would be to drop down and pick in the early 30s. And if they could do it without getting rid of their other 2 second-round picks, 56 and 62, I think they could do that, giving them 3 picks in that round. Where do you think the Bills, as far as the defensive tackle market would go? Again, we're assuming Grant and Harmon are gone. Where would you look first? Would you try to get one in the early 30s where maybe Tyleik Williams is there? Or would you wait to 56 and maybe a TJ Sanders is sitting there or some other guy that you think? What do you think would be the best bet there for just defensive tackle addition?
So first off, I got to say that is music to my ears that you're suggesting a trade back. And that is just the NFL draft analyst in me that even if you come in with 10 picks and you're a Super Bowl contender, get more roles at the table. You might not be able to roster all of those players eventually, but there's just a stronger likelihood that you're going to hit on quality players if you have more picks. And a lot of teams like the Miami Dolphins have run into problems with their roster construction. They had back-to-back years with only 4 selections in each draft. You don't want to be on the other end of that spectrum. So trading up, for as much as you can feel confident, you are so tantalized by a Dalton Kincaid or a Kyer Elam, it's usually not the best idea to ultimately trade up and give up future assets. So I agree with you on that, and it has not been brought up a lot that the Bills could actually trade out. But you're right that if the Bills don't have anywhere close to 30 first-round grades, and they see Harmon gone and the corner's gone and Kenneth Grant is gone, move back. Ask any of the, call some of those teams if they don't already have trades set up. Call the Giants that you have a strong relationship with and say, do you want to come up 4 picks to get your quarterback? We want 3 selections in the second round. I think that would be very valuable for this team. What I would say to answer your question, though, about in what direction or when should they address defensive tackle, I think doing it right at 34 would make a lot of sense because I think after Harmon, after Walter Nolan, who we didn't mention because he's more of an Ed Oliver type, and Derek Harmon, Kenneth Grant, there's probably going to be a run at the defensive tackle position with a lot of those names that you mentioned. That I love TJ Sanders from South Carolina. The Bills had him in for a visit. Talk about pass rushing ability. It's certainly there. Darius Alexander from Toledo is a fun name that did so many different things on that defense. He dropped in coverage. He rushed off the edge. He played 0 technique. He played 5 technique. He can really do it all. He's a really fun player. And even CJ West from Indiana is, to me, kind of a lesser version of Tyleik Williams in that he's a great run defender. Like off the bus is going to help any team's run defense immediately. And last season at Indiana showed ability as a pass rusher late in his college career. So I wouldn't necessarily wait and hope that one of those players ultimately falls to 56 or 62. I would trade back, get the extra pick, and then ultimately select the defensive tackle there because I still think especially after the signings of Dane Jackson and Trey White, D tackle next to Ed Oliver is actually the Bills' biggest need.
Yeah, I've been saying that right along even before they signed those guys. I mean,
Yep.
they have to get bigger in the middle of that line. And like we talked about earlier, you've got to have Daquan Jones's replacement set and ready to go this year. One other guy I want to bring up before we move on from D tackles. There's been a lot of smoke apparently about Joshua Farmer having the Bills being interested in him. There's been a lot of contact apparently. It's been reported. What do you think about him? Because he feels like he wouldn't be a guy you would draft in the 30s there. Maybe you could wait on him, or do you have a different opinion on him?
No, I mean, I don't have him graded like in my 50s, but it would make sense that if the Bills are kind of utilizing him as a contingency plan, that they're probably trying to have every option kind of mapped out, where at 62, or maybe if they get an extra third, if they trade back, or maybe in the 4th round, he would make a lot of sense. He looks the part in that he's like 6'3", over 300 pounds, has insanely long arms, and is very athletic for the position. I think he kind of is similar, and it's not surprising that the Bills are interested in him, to a lot of their other 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounders that they pick, like Dawson Knox and Spencer Brown, that are big-time athletes with all the measurables, all the traits, but are not fully developed right when they get to the NFL. And that the Bills, Sean McDermott, Bobby Babich, might feel good about cultivating a lot of his natural ability, because there are times where he doesn't really know where the football is. His pass rushing ability was only in flashes. You didn't see him consistently pushing the pocket. But I think he's someone that is a pretty highly regarded name in this draft class, even from a bad Florida State team last year, because, again, 6'3", 305, 310 pounds with really long arms and flashes that almost look first-round caliber. They just don't happen enough for me to have a really high grade on him.
Yeah, I wasn't real high on it. I think you're right. I'm not big on him. I mean, maybe a 3rd round pick. I don't know if he'll be there in the 4th round. If they were to get back in the 3rd round, maybe I'd consider him. But yeah, he was down my list too. I wanted to bring him up because there has been some smoke around him. I don't know, why, but there just has been. All right. So before we go to edge rusher, because I do want to talk about a few guys there, because I have a funny feeling they may go that way. But cornerback, obviously a glaring need for this team. And look, Trey White, everyone loves Trey White, and it's kind of interesting that they brought him back. He started to play a little bit better last year when he went to Baltimore. He was terrible with the Rams. We all saw it. That's why they wanted to move on so quick. And with those 2 major injuries that he suffered in Buffalo, he is clearly nowhere near all-pro Trey. We know this. They bring him back, and he understands that he's not going to be handed a starting job. The Bills did not promise him a thing. But Chris, right now, when you look at the depth chart, he is CB2. I mean, you've got Benford, and you've got to believe that Tre'Davious White is the starter going into these OTAs, and then Dane Jackson he's just a guy. He's always been just a guy to me, but he'll be just a guy this year. That's why I really feel, as much as they need to add that D tackle, because this is a deep draft and they can get somebody in the 2nd round at number 30, Chris. Now, we know the top 3 guys are going to be gone. Barron's definitely going to be gone, obviously Hunter and Will Johnson. Who sits there at 30 of the guys that are left that you would take at number 30 that would fit the Bills? Do you think that's something they should do?
Okay, and in a vacuum, I would say there's 3 players, but I'm saying in a vacuum because I don't know about the injuries for one of those players. And I'll start with him. Savon Ravel from East Carolina. I think if he did not tear the ACL in September, I mean, obviously it's impossible to predict how his season would have gone. But based on 2023, which I thought was spectacular on film for him, he probably would have been someone that we wouldn't have been talking about, because we would have said there's no way that Ravel is ultimately going to get to 30. He would represent a higher ceiling at the cornerback position than the Bills have really ever had. Because I think if you look back even at Trey White in 2017, his combine workout was not insane. He was like solid across the board. At LSU, the pass breakups were there, the interceptions were there. They got the most out of him. Then you mentioned Dane Jackson, even Levi Wallace, who we didn't mention, obviously. They were always getting the most or getting overachievement from a lot of these corners. Ravel at 6'2" and around almost 200 pounds with long arms, a lot of ball production, and I think he's a good tackler too, would be like, man, now they get this toy of someone that is a big time athlete that was really productive. Yes, at a smaller school level, he would be a lot of fun. I don't know though how the ACL rehab is, how doctors feel he's going to recover. You would think at like 22 years old, he's going to be fine, and we're not going to be able to tell. So he would be one. Yeah. Trey Amos feels a lot like Tre'Davious White in that he's an SEC corner. The ball production is there. Good, not amazing testing at the combine. He kind of feels like a Billsy type selection because they have leaned into experience at that position over, a 21-year-old that's not very experienced, that has more upside than anything else. And I think Maxwell Hairston that you mentioned earlier from Kentucky would also represent a newer, higher ceiling at the cornerback spot. To run sub 4.3 at the combine, the Bills have not had that speed at the position in the Sean McDermott era. They just haven't. He's a feisty tackler, misses some tackles, but plays a lot bigger than his size. So those three, I think, would be all completely, like, I would be fine with any of those three cornerbacks at 30 for the Bills. I think they would represent the correct value at, like you're saying, what is probably either priority 1 or priority 2, just in terms of needs for this Bills defense.
It's funny when you're looking at their depth chart, when they signed Dane Jackson, but more specifically when they signed back Trey White, that to me, and I could be totally off base on this, that felt like they are building a safety net so they can pick a cornerback in the first round, but they're not going to have the pressure on that kid of having to step in and start right away, because before they signed Dane Jackson and Trey White, that kid, whoever it was going to be, it was obvious he was going to have to step right in and play. It almost makes me think, too, that with Ravel, if he ends up being their pick, and I agree with you 100% on that kid, he would have been a top 15 pick if he hadn't gotten hurt. And I think as long as he is back from that knee injury, I think he could be a great player for the Bills. It almost feels to me, Chris, like they're setting the runway by, hey, we've got Trey White that can start early in the season, while Ravel will probably miss OTAs, maybe even part of training camp. But somewhere in the middle of the season, this kid's going to be good enough to get right on the field. Am I crazy there, or no? Did you give any of that a thought?
No, not at all. And I think now with this team, not that the Bills just expect that they're going to win the division and be one of the top seeds in the AFC, but let's be real about it. They know, and this culture has completely shifted in thinking that December, January are the most important months of the season. It's not, even if the Bills, we've seen them have 6-6 starts and still win the AFC East. And in general, they're usually pretty good September, October, where they're out to a bigger lead in the division. If Ravel is playing quality football and it doesn't happen until Thanksgiving and he starts to really come into his own for the final month of the regular season into early January, that will be a huge win for this defense. And I just want to see Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich and that whole coaching staff, again, get a cornerback into this very time-tested system that has created tons of turnovers, doesn't allow a lot of big plays, who is that freaky athlete with the size and the length that they just have not had. Even Christian Benford, a lot of us thought, including myself, which I was obviously wrong about this, but that he was going to have to play safety in the NFL because the athleticism really just wasn't there. I don't want necessarily the Bills to always have overachievers in their secondary. I want to see them work with a really toolsy player who, by the way, again, made a lot of plays on the football at East Carolina, did it on a regular basis at a small school level. They would get that with Ravel from East Carolina.
Again, you and I have no idea what the true medicals are on this kid, but do you think if the Bills do go D tackle in the first round, which again, neither one of us is going to argue that point, they need to add one of those two. Is there any chance that Ravel could still be sitting there when they pick, say, at 56 in the second round? Do you think that there's just too much talent there and some team will take a swing, or our team's going to just be too worried about it and not pick them?
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all. I mean, I just go back to last year. I mean, Cooper DeJean didn't last all the way to 56, but look at the final mock drafts of all the big insiders. It was Cooper DeJean was picked in the teens, in the 20s. Oh, no one cares about his injury. He's definitely going to be a first rounder. The Eagles got him in round 2, and he was integral to them winning the Super Bowl after they picked Quinyon Mitchell, another small school, longer, highly productive, athletic corner in the first round. And I then think back to 2023, where a lot of people would have been happy with O'Cyrus Torrence for the Bills in round 1. And he was there at 56 or 58, wherever they picked that year. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all that we see 4 or 5 corners or just overall prospects that we have routinely seen in the first round of these mock drafts available in the 40s and the 50s. So would that be some pretty good fortune for the Bills? Sure. But I don't think it is an absolute lock, especially small school coming off an injury, that he is just totally gone well before the Bills have that second or their first pick in the second round.
All right. So though he's gone, Harrison's gone. What about, I hear a lot of smoke about Darian Porter too, out of Iowa State, who wouldn't be a first round pick. And from what I understand, Chris, he's been at Iowa, or he's been there. It's Iowa State, right? Is he Iowa State?
Yeah, Iowa State. Yep.
Was he there for like 12 years? Wasn't he there older for like a long, long time? Right? He's older, right? And there wasn't a lot of playing time with him, I think, too. For some reason, he just didn't. But he came on great in his very last year. What's the deal with him? Because there's been a lot of smoke about him too.
There has. So he's another one. It's a good segue from Ravel. Big time tester and long. And ironically, the Bills had in James Bradbury for a visit, I think a week or two ago. Ultimately didn't sign him, went with Tre'Davious White. Very similar size and workout to James Bradbury. And I bring him up because he was picked by the Carolina Panthers when Brandon Beane was there and was like out of Samford, was a mid-round pick, I think third rounder, and was really good in Carolina. So there is kind of a prototype and a history of Brandon Beane gravitating toward the bigger, longer cornerbacks. Darian Porter is 24 years old. Now, to me, as a draft analyst, I don't love that. But Dalton Kincaid turned 24 during his rookie season. So it's not like the Bills are always shying away from drafting an older prospect. And obviously, post-COVID, a lot of these players are just older in general because they got that extra year for the COVID season. It was a former wide receiver who certainly has those translatable skills when it comes to tracking the football. Made a lot of plays on the ball, finding it. It's not a Leotis McKelvin or Ron Darby type situation where they're in coverage, but the ball just zips over their shoulder. Darian Porter will make plays on the football routinely. And the one thing that I haven't really mocked him to the Bills often is that the tackling is not very good at all. And I think maybe that's just because he's a former wide receiver, doesn't have that down pat yet. And we always hear Sean McDermott routinely bring up, and I think every coach wants good tacklers everywhere, but Sean McDermott will always bring up, hey, we need our corners to be great tacklers. And I think of Taron Johnson, even Dane Jackson, Levi Wallace, made a lot of plays just in space as tacklers. That would be the one reason why, despite the big-time testing and the big-time ball production, that we're not routinely seeing and hearing Darian Porter's name in the first round in this draft.
Okay. I want to switch over to edge. That's a position that I'm not super high on for the Bills because right now they're in really good situation, even with Michael Hoyt serving the suspension. You still got Javon Solomon as a 5th-round pick last year who can be your 4th, and you wouldn't have to play him all that much. You've got Epinesa, Bosa, and now I'm blanking on the Rousseau. So you're okay there. They're not desperate to need to add an edge rusher, in my opinion, this year. Obviously, Bosa's probably gone next year, so you're going to want to replace him at some point. If it came to that, and there's the Bills sitting at number 30, the draft or the board has not fallen their way, cornerback wise or D tackle, which of the edge rushers do you think would be there? And who do you think the Bills would lean to if they wanted to pick one?
So I don't think your assessment of the edge rusher need for the Bills is crazy. I would be a little bit like, I think it's a little bit more of a higher priority because I'm of the belief that although they like AJ Epinesa, I think he's kind of just a guy and he doesn't really
I agree there. Well, we're on the same page there.
He doesn't really do much. I think at times he's an okay run defender. At times he's an okay pass rusher, but there are long stretches of games where I'm like, was AJ Epinesa on the field? Like I didn't see him really do anything. So I think it's a little bit of a bigger need than what you outlined, but it's fine that we're slightly disagreeing there. I will start with James Pierce. To me, he is I
saw you made him your number 1 guy, right?
He's my number one player. Prospect? He's my number 1 prospect in the class, and that is not factoring in off field. Like I wasn't watching Tennessee games on the sideline to see if he was sitting by himself and all of that. Like I don't know if any of those scouting report or those like scout rumors are true, if there's smoke to try to get him to fall. from the evaluation on film and then factoring in the analytics, what he did at the combine, just his production, absolutely through the roof. Back-to-back seasons at Tennessee with a pressure rate over 21%, which is astronomical. Normally, the TJ Watts and even Myles Garrett, they're at 16, 17, 18. You get close to 20 and you're like, oh my gosh, it's like Micah Parsons level. Back-to-back seasons in the SEC at 21 and 22 years old, 21% pressure rate. So that's like whatever he was doing on the field was working against the best competition in the country. 6'5", almost 250 pounds, ran 4.47 in Indianapolis. Didn't have a big vertical, I believe, but the broad jump was still good. He's from Charlotte, North Carolina, so you figure Brandon Beane has some connections there from his time in Carolina to get to really know what the makeup of this player is. And because of all of those apparent character concerns, maturity concerns, whatever you want to call them, I think he could be available for the Bills and was really be the only one that I think the Bills should say, we just have to let this usurp the need at D tackle and at corner to just pick someone that is a premium position and a high upside player at edge rusher.
All right. Michael Williams, Georgia. What do you think of him?
I'm a lot lower on him. I think he's at best Trevon Walker 2.0, who was the first pick in 2021 when Aiden Hutchinson was, or 2022 when Aiden Hutchinson was the clear number one player that the Jags ultimately passed on. He was really good as a freshman, and it felt like, oh man, this could be the next number one pick from Georgia, but he never got better. Like the pressure rate never increased. He never showed more pass rushing moves. And I wonder, has he already just reached his ceiling? And then he didn't really test particularly well at the Georgia Pro Day. If he's there, because there are some similarities to Greg Rousseau, although I don't think he's quite as explosive as Rousseau is. We know the Bills have traditionally, outside of Javon Solomon, their fifth rounder last year, have liked the bigger bodied players on the edge. I wouldn't be, oh my God, floored if the Bills picked him, but I would be a lot lower on him just because there's not a lot of players that have a low pressure rate in college who suddenly become a 16, 17, 18% pressure rate player in the NFL.
And then real quickly to wrap up, give me just some quick thoughts on Ezeruco from Boston College and Scorton from Texas A&M. Because I think those guys might be maybe second round area for the Bills possibly.
Yeah, there's some hype that I'm seeing, and again, 90% of these rumors will ultimately not be true when we actually get to the first and second round. Ezeruco from Boston College is getting some buzz for potentially being a first rounder. From a off-field character standpoint, apparently Ezeruco would be very Billsy because he's like a leader. He was a captain. Everyone loves him, all that, which I think matters for the Bills. Do I think it should matter as much as maybe it does at times? Probably not. He's actually very similar to Javon Solomon in that he's short, he's undersized, but good for him, has very long arms, almost has like offensive tackle length in terms of his arms. That was the case with Javon Solomon last year. And like Solomon, who at Troy was like a big-time sack producer, Ezeruco, I think, led college football with like 15 or 16 sacks last year. Is the pressure rate kind of equitable to the sacks? Not really. His pressure rate was right around 14 or 15%, which is good, but it's not 21% or it's not 17 or 18%. I think he has the pass rush moves, is not quite a big time athlete that's super explosive or super strong because he's like 6'1" and 240. But if the Bills have all of their other options kind of exhausted at 30 and they can't move back and he's there, I would not be shocked at all if he was the pick. And Scourton is interesting in that at Purdue and then Texas A&M, across the board, the production was there. The pressure rate was good. He's bigger. He's kind of got a stocky frame, which helps him convert speed to power as an edge rusher. But we didn't get to see him work out at the Combine or the Texas A&M Pro Day. So I don't know if the Bills, we've heard that they have, all this tracking data now that they're not really caring as much about Combine workouts or Pro Day workouts. But to not have those certifiable numbers, those official numbers pre-draft, I don't want to say it makes me concerned, but I do like to see those numbers to be able to compare him to other prospects. He would be someone that is more in the probably better version of AJ Epinesa mold, where he is a 3-down player who can set the edge against the run, make plays against the run, and is a pretty good, but maybe not a great pass rusher around the corner.
Okay. All right, Chris. So you've got Kenneth Grant from Michigan going to the Bills. You feel good about that? Or what do you think? You think it's going to happen? Because I think a lot of people would be very happy with that pick.
I feel decently good about it. I would say Trey Amos would be probably my number 2 in terms of just likelihood to be there, because that obviously matters more than anything else here. Yeah. And that he would check a lot of the boxes that I think the Bills, they just need a corner. He played on the outside. He's an SEC player that I mentioned earlier. A lot of parallels to Trey White. So Kenneth Grant or Trey Amos would not be shocking to me. I think those are the 2 most likely scenarios for the Bills at pick 30 in the first round.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. One of the best guys in the business, breaking it down for you here at Believe in Bills. Chris, I want to really thank you for taking your time. I know you're busy as hell right now at this time of year. And we even called an audible on you. We were going to tape yesterday, and we threw an audible at you. So thanks again for being here, man. Appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me, Sal. This was a lot of fun.
All right. Take care, everybody. And we will see you. I think Adam and I are going to do something at some point here, maybe on Friday after the Bills have made a pick. Maybe they'll make a pick. I'm not sure. As we said, man, I would be all in favor of the Bills trading out.
Me too.
But just do a better job and not take Keon Coleman. I'm not sure about Keon Coleman yet, Chris. I'm not real high on that pick right now.
So as a draft analyst, I'll just tell you a quick story to end here. As a draft analyst, what I love about my job is that there's no way that I can have any hindsight afterward. Like I can't say, oh, well, yeah, I have my grades and that's it. I had a much lower grade on Keon Coleman than I had on Ladd McConkey. And I really wanted the Bills to pick Ladd McConkey just because of that, because I had a early second round grade on McConkey, and I think like a third or a fourth round grade on Keon Coleman. I have 2 daughters. They're not really into the draft. They're 6 and 8. So last year they're 5 and 7. And they sit on my lap Friday as they're getting ready for bed. And my oldest is talking to me and is like, Dad, who do you want the Bills to pick? And I didn't answer. I just said, anyone but Keon Coleman. And they picked Keon Coleman. My wife's recording it. She's like, oh, this is going to be a great moment that like Chris's daughters are finally getting into the draft that he loves. And then like, I don't even think we saved the video because it was such a strange, awkward video and that when they announced Keon Coleman. So, and that was not like hating the guy or like, it was strictly just based on my pre-draft evaluation, grade, scouting report that I thought Ladd McConkey would ultimately be a better wide receiver in the NFL. Had a better rookie season. We'll see how it works out, but that's a not so good draft memory that I don't think I'll ever forget because it involved my 2 girls and it ultimately didn't really turn into this great memory that we could play at family get-togethers for the next couple years.
All right. Well, Chris, make a new memory this year. Okay. You've got another chance to do this. So make sure you get the girls together and get it right this time. All right.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. And Adam, as I said, we'll be back pretty soon here. Anyway, this is Believe in Bills. And again, I want to thank Chris Trapasso for being a great guest because he is in the know on the NFL draft. Take care, everybody. And I'll be out there all weekend to cover the draft for you at the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. Have a great day, everyone.